All right, so this is the October 19th or to this general meeting. I dropped the link to the docs. Please sign in. And let me go ahead and share my screen. There we are.
By the way, before we start, I still couldn't manage to add my name on the README file, so I keep getting an error when I try to pull request. If anyone can help me with that, I would appreciate it.
I will love to have you.
Sasha, can you give him a hand?
But I saw you have already.
Oh, who was that?
Yeah, actually, Tucker has already. Yeah, so I saw like there is a pull request remaining, and I found like you have your name there, Tucker.
Really, I just checked in the morning and couldn't see it, so I tried. Think to.
Okay.
Focus here, but
maybe Steve, you can look. There is one pending pull request.
I don't recall any. Been trying to keep up on the pull requests because of Hacktoberfest, so
I think it's this one, yeah. 393, I think. Is that it? Update readme.md.
Yep. All right, that one's done, and let me do the other one.
Privy vulnerability scanner. Maybe Turkey, maybe your name's like
okay,
like a
so he's
hacking.
merged now. So you should be set now. I just merged both those pull requests, so we should be good on that front.
Okay, so let me not occupy this meeting with this topic. Okay, now I see my name. Thank you.
No
All
problem.
right, great. All right, so the general community meeting, we generally cover what is being done in the other two working groups. So I'll just go quickly over the 3 projects that the ambassadors are working on. We are close to the end of our election process or our nomination process. I will tomorrow. I will. I think we have this week. If we don't, if I'm supposed to shut the nominations down, I'll do that on Wednesday, and I'll get the election process set up. So I'll send out the actual voting. And if you're in the Google groups, you will receive a invite to join the voting. And if you don't, it means you're not interested in voting. So that's how that works. I think that I haven't looked, but if we have an issue with enough people in nominating themselves for the board, I will push that out before I obviously close the nominations. We are working on our December 8th meeting, our summit, I guess you'd call it, contributor summit. I believe we have 2 more openings for speakers. So if you're interested in speaking, grab a slot, and we'll be recording that in November. So we have some time, we still have time to think about it. And then we have, of course, Hacktoberfest going on. And I think that is pretty much the 3 things that we've been focused on. We do have a group of you who are working on the live office hours. And I think that is moving forward. So we got quite a few things that kind of up in the air. We're still juggling, but I think by the end of this month, most of that stuff will be over. At least the elections will be over, the Hacktoberfest will be over. We can focus on our December 8th event and getting our live office hour meetings going.
Yeah, so hopefully by the end of the, I don't know if we'll make it by the end of the month, but we'll be wrapping up service catalog really soon here as part of that process. Just a heads up, Tracy and I are headed to the Linux Foundation Leadership Summit at the beginning of November. So if there's any topics that you want us to like research, or any specific groups you want us to talk to. Basically, it ends up being the main, it'll be the company sponsored or company contributors to the Linux Foundation, which Deploy Hub's one of them. And then also if you're like on a governance board or any of those things, you get invited. It's one of these invite only type of events, but if there's anything you want us to look for, let us know, and we'll be able to reach out and make some connections for you.
So for example, I think we're going to have to reach out to somebody over there around the contributor license for a company, because it was not cleaned, right? You struggled through that, Steve?
Yeah, myself and Ujwal had problems with the website for getting his company signed up, and I was trying to do the same thing for Deploy Hub, and it's just a bizarre process. Sometimes if you get to the same page from one direction, it'll work through the website. If you get to it from a different direction, it doesn't work. So it's like an ordering thing.
So once it does get signed up, we'll do a nice little press release for Ujwal's company becoming a contributor.
Yeah, he's all set, so he can. We can go ahead with that press release. We got his figured out. So Ujwal in Interbase is all set on the CLA front. They've been doing some work on getting started with like how to install Ortelius type of thing. So they're moving along on that front.
Great.
So we can do a press release around that whenever we have some time. So the other thing I have just for this group to think about in terms of on the architecture side, we had originally talked about adding to the roadmap, and this is something that the governing board is going to be very helpful with, because we usually have to solve these problems in the community, and I think there are discussions that need to have deeper thought in them. Originally, we were thinking about after the service catalog, what would be in our roadmap is GitOps integration, which I think is really, really important. But we have had users now reaching out to us about building service-to-service relationships. And Steve has started working with one company in building that out. It would require basically some plugins. So Steve, could you just briefly go over what you're doing with Temenos? Yeah, so what we're working on is mapping out on the front end the RESTful API calls. So for example, in our microservices, we have there's a text file microservice. So the text file microservice is the one that gets the README file and the Swagger file from the backend database and brings it up to the front end. That microservice makes a call to validate user, which is another microservice, to validate the user's permissions. So to tell whether they have access to that environment, that data. So what we have is the text file microservice is producing one endpoint, which is where you can grab the text file from the database, and it consumes one other microservice, which is validate user. And then if we go over to the validate user microservice, it doesn't consume anything else. It just produces the validate user microservice endpoint. So what ends up happening is we have these relationships between microservices at a RESTful API standpoint, what you're producing and what you're consuming. Now, what I've done on the Deploy Hub side is I've added in another table to start tracking these relationships to producers and consumers. it's just a small little table. It basically has the verb, the endpoint, and then I think maybe the description or something like that. Really basic, but it allows us to map the relationships across the application, everything that an application is consuming and producing and all that stuff, and you get these nice maps.
Even if the consumer, if the application team hasn't told us specifically in their package that they use that microservice. So I would call them transitive microservices.
Right. And the way we get this data is as part of our CLI, you have to provide us, as part of the build process, when you do like a Docker build, we need to get two files. We need to get to the producing file and the consuming file. They're just JSON files. So like in the example I gave, the text file, a microservice, when we went to build that image, we would have two JSON files, one saying that it produces the text file endpoint, and the second file that it says is consumes the validation user endpoint. Now, to get those files created, what you produce, for example, is pretty easy to figure out because we have our Swagger file. We know through the Swagger documentation what endpoints we're going to end up exposing from that level. Figuring out what you're going to consume is going to be a little harder because it's based on the language. So if you're in Java, you have to look for certain Java methods to do HTTP calls. If you're in Node, you're going to have a different structure. If you're in Go, you're going to have an additional structure. So to gather this data, the producers and consumers, we're going to need plugins to scan code to help people grab this information from their code base.
And then explain when that code scanning occurs.
That code scanning occurs when you do your Docker build. So when you do your Docker build, what you have is typically you do your Docker build in the context of a workspace, and that workspace, and this doesn't matter, it's regardless of the pretty much the CI/CD tool, they all have this concept of a workspace. But basically that's where your Git repo has been checked out to. So you have all the source code available for you to go ahead and scan at that level. So that's where we'll need to create these plugins to start scanning the code for these API calls.
I wonder if, do you know if Shipwright does anything like this?
No, they're just a Kubernetes build tool. So I'm like, I'd have to double check, but I don't think they do.
So as far as we know, nobody is scanning basically for, because what we're talking about in essence is a bomb at the microservice level that we could use to determine the transitive dependencies.
Correct.
You think somebody else would be doing that? We could get those bomb reports from somewhere.
No, because it is RESTful API calls, so they're like HTTP calls. Nobody is really scanning for those. The tools out there that are doing scanning will let you know that you're using the HTTP library for Java, but it's not going to break it down into giving you a list of all the where HTTP is being used to go make a call to a database. I mean, to a RESTful endpoint. So it's very language dependent.
So does everybody understand that the problem or what we're solving? Is there any questions about what we're looking at solving?
I'll try and understand it. Is it to do with like CVE scanning within the Docker image when it's being built? Is that what you're doing?
It's going to be scanning for all your RESTful API points. All
okay.
your URLs.
Within the Docker container when you're building it.
Well, we're not going to be scanning the container. We're going to be scanning the source code that was used to create the container.
Okay.
So Yeah, if I understand this use case correctly, so we just have to create the application map. Basically, whatever microservices is speaking to other microservices, right?
Correct. Yeah,
I
so
think
so the other way to look at this is on the back end. So if you had, let's say like Kiali, Kiali is going to give you the transaction graph on the back end side in your Kubernetes cluster. So if you're using Istio and Kiali, you can see that the text file microservice is calling over to the validate user microservice. So you'll get that transaction map on the back end, but not on the front end. And the reason why we want it on the front end is if you break backward compatibility for some reason, you want to know who is going to be affected by it. So it gives us another insight into the relationships.
Right. So there's going to be different kinds of source that we have to scan to make that work. And I don't think it's a lot. Yeah, how many scanners do you think we would end up needing to write?
You would have like a Swagger or Open API scanner. You would have a Java, Go, Python, and Node would probably be the ones that we'd need to start with. So whatever that was, 4 or 5.
And then the code, we would just point to a repository of what code we wanted scanned in that particular repository, or how do we know the code that's associated?
That would be part of the build process. So when you're doing your Docker build and you have your CI workflow running,
our scanners would be added to that.
Yes. So
okay.
As part of the CI process and the pipeline process, when Ortelius needs to be inserted into that process. So we do our CLI gets inserted after the Docker build. And actually it's technically after the Docker push. We do our call over to Ortelius to grab the information and push it up to our database. That program, our CLI could be told to, here's your Git repo and here's the languages I want you to scan for. We know that this is a Node.js Docker build that we're doing. We'll go ahead and scan the Node.js code with the Node.js plugin.
So if everybody can start thinking about that, maybe even take a look at if anybody could take a look to see if there's already existing scanners that might do something like that. There probably isn't, but it doesn't hurt to kind of check it out because it seems like right now a bigger pain point for some end users than putting the front end on Git or the GitOps process, because maybe that's not as popular right now around microservices, even though I think we have to do both. It just depends on which one should we take on coming the first of the year. And we might be able to do both. And I think this is how Jenkins does it. They just create basically those projects out there, and the end user community or the contributor community decides which one they want to work on. And so those are some of the topics that we're going to start having at the governance board level to figure out which of those projects that we would push out there for the community to start working on. But since we're still a small community, we're not as big as Jenkins, obviously. I think that it's easier for us to come to some agreement of what that roadmap is going to look like. And I think that one that problem fits in what we do in terms of mapping. And it may be something that that our users are in need of sooner than later. So just something to think about in the coming, winter season, what we're going to really push for in January. We're going to start.
And the one thing for us to move on to some of this fun stuff, we're typical developers, so we've done all the coding like on the service catalog. Now it came to testing, and we're like, I want to go on to the next project and forget testing. So we definitely need to wrap up the service catalog pieces. We don't have that much left out there to do.
And
you know,
documentation. We don't even like to talk about that.
well, I think documentation's lower on the list than testing, so.
No, I know. I do them together though. Sometimes it's easy to document and test at the same time.
So we need to take a focus and just knock that out and get the service catalog out the door and move on. Now, some of the stuff on the service catalog, like the Helm charts and the chart museum, are lining up with the GitOps piece. So things are overlapping, which is good. We're only doing them once, but we just need to get some of this just off our list and so we can move on.
So I'm proposing that for getting service catalog done, that we do like a service catalog week, and we make it the last week of October, so any pull requests can be part of the Hacktoberfest. So it just a thought that we might make a push to make that happen. And I have
like
6
drawing pictures. Sorry, drawing pictures.
Oh, there's a lot of architecture pictures to draw, so you can get started. We still have to create a new installer for the new version because it's based on a microservice architecture. So we do have some work around that to do.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's being worked on. Brad's been working on that because he needs it from the GitOps side, and Ujwal's been asking about it because he wants to get the documentation firmed up around the new install process. So what we just need to get that out there. I'm supposed to have a meeting with Brad. It's going to try to tomorrow, just to talk about his ideas for a chart museum, to see. I have a couple as well. But once we get that sorted out and kind of decided on, then we can go to get that implemented.
So before we have 5 minutes left, we do have. Did he have to leave? Turker, are you still there? I don't
Yes.
see you.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm also listening. I tried to figure out what you're really talking about, but I shared my opinion on the chat link, not to disturb you while you were talking. So as far as I understood, the solution that you are looking for is kind of similar with the current modern APM tools like AppDynamics or Dynatrace, because they start tracing the transaction from the end user side by just inserting a JavaScript or an SDK to the application and follow it to the latest backend like the DB or something. So we know that we need an end-to-end transaction flow to figure out in here, right?
Right, but what we want to do is we want to do it on the front end side, because the reason being is if a transaction, if somebody changes a RESTful API, let's say they add a parameter that's required or another field in the JSON that's required, we want to show that they're going to break compatibility early on before they break production.
So we want to create proactive data instead of
we want something intelligent to discover whether it will cause a production incident.
Yes, before we deploy.
Yeah,
and find out that way. Yeah,
because what will happen is you'll have different versions of, so in the Ortelius world, we have versions of components, and that version of a component is going to map to a version of the RESTful API endpoints. Now, a lot of times the endpoints aren't going to change. It'll be like the business logic in the microservice that's going to change, but the endpoint itself isn't going to change. Same parameters, same data in and out type of thing. But when you do have that case where you are going to have to change something, we want to show that map, and that ends up being another component version. So what's running in your dev state coming out of CI could have a new required parameter where what's running in production is the older version that doesn't have that required parameter. So we can use this data to diff not only the differences between what is making up an application, but also dive deeper into the relationships about, somebody's going to break backward compatibility on an endpoint, who's affected by it type of thing. So it's going to give us a lot more details down the road. But your idea, that the way you're describing it, is exactly what we're talking about. We're just doing it on the front end side instead of the back end side.
Okay, my point was not containing any intelligence, but to discover if a problem would occur, but that would definitely a cool feature to have it.
Yeah, we're thinking about it in terms of the supply chain question, right? Who's in my supply chain before I ever push it out the door? And there's so much hidden. There are many hidden points in microservices because the transitive dependencies are not clear. So you think about, JFrog made their living off of tracking transitive dependencies from a code scanning point from a build, a monolithic build. We're looking at doing similar things in a microservices world, and that's where those scanners are going to be. I think will be a very interesting feature. And what we have to decide as a group is what we want to take on for next year. And we might leave that to the governing board to decide, but we'll just, because it's going to be a pretty decent sized project, and so is the GitOps one. When we may just have the folks out of Australia continue working on the GitOps and branch, this team to work on another piece, if we can do two big projects at the same time. And on that, I want it, because we're going to run out of time. Some of you may or may not know, I have been on a hunt for Turkish technologists. I continue to try to expand our global reach, and we have friends who are from Turkey, and you wouldn't believe the brilliant people who are in Turkey. So I decided to go hunt down some Turkish folks, which is where I met Turker. So would you kind of introduce yourself to the group?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I was just a little bit feeling alien here. So thanks for giving me the opportunity. So I'm Türker. I'm an IT professional here in Turkey, working as the head of IT ops in one of the largest software companies in Turkey named Logo Software. And I have been working with the microservices, the managing services with using microservices, and DevOps tools and processes for like more than 5 years, and still trying to learn and expand my knowledge here. Before here in Logo Software, I was in the telco industry for more than 13 years at Vodafone Turkey, and mostly spent my most of part of my experience until now. So I feel really excited and happy to be in such a community. I was always looking for a chance to be a part of it. I hope I will contribute as much as I can and try to bring this cool tool into the market as best as possible.
And he has a little brother who wants to do data science, so I'm hoping we get him in these
yes,
calls.
I'm still trying to convince him about just putting his name on the data part. I see just 2 names there, and I keep telling him, so there's an opportunity here. Why don't you get in and try to contribute? So I'm in the middle of the way, so I think he will be here soon.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I so much appreciate you being here. All of us do.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am also doing machine learning.
What was that, Arvin?
I am also doing the data science and machine learning.
Well, there now, we could have a team of university folks working on data science then. We have a lot of data, and as we start bringing in all of this data about these other transitive dependencies, we have even more data. So there's an interesting proposition out there for the data science side. And I think, Arvin, you've looked at better display of our data. All of those topics are really, really critical for us, and I hope that we can get a small team really focused on solving it.
Yeah, hope so. I am attending a machine learning bootcamp right now.
Nice.
So my focus is both data science and machine learning.
Well, there's other students there then too. So
Yeah, we can do a separate meeting on that topic.
that would be great. That would be great. We could have a data science working group that we could start building up. That would be great, especially if it's got a lot of university students. That would be a really fun working group.
Yeah, especially if we are talking some kind of a tool that will be intelligent. So that would something definitely need.
Yeah, we want to build some intelligence around it. So, for example, with this kind of data, we could predict how many applications are impacted by one update to a single transitive dependency.
Mhm.
That alone is pretty powerful information. So the data science part, because then we could then start thinking about this idea of risk levels and even creating kind of like in GitHub, you can star a project that you like. You could potentially automatically star a microservice that has a lot of dependence or is impacting a lot of applications, but never breaks. So it's a safe one. We could associate risk levels to microservices that always break stuff. So there's some interesting AI that we could build around the data.
Okay, can I have a question? Just a quick one, I guess. Since I don't know the tool very well until now, are we keeping track of the incidents in the scope of Ortelius? Because some of my time I have just spent a little bit time on the AI ops side, and in that project we were trying to bring up some intelligence on the incident history of the applications. If we keep track of the incidents, what is affected by what, after sometimes if the data is collected well enough, we can start predictions at that time. So is this in the scope of anything until now?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh.
We've thought about it, and we can take right now, for example, we know if a deployment failed, but in the future we could add to what we call our service catalog a connection to like a I don't know, PagerDuty, or we already have that says how many tickets were opened on it, or because we don't always know, just because a ticket's open doesn't mean it was a real problem. But we could certainly add integrations to incident tools to get that information. We ourselves would not be a support desk, but we should be able to integrate into that in the future if that's something that we feel would be a useful piece. And I think it would be because of that kind of data. There's been 15 incidents on this particular microservice in the last week. Let's not push it out again, right? Let's wait, let's get it stabilized. So there's definitely that kind of data we should be looking at in the future.
Yes, and if you correlate well enough with the incidents with the other microservices changes, something like that, so then you can make more accurate predictions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. We are trying to make predictions about the success or failure of a single change.
I got an idea. Like the microservices part we are doing, can we convert it into a data? For each track, we are like converting it to a new part of data, or like a new column. So we can easily track it down in the data way or in the visual way.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't, but we'd have to find out from Steve what he thought.
Yeah, so the main goal of Ortelius is to, like Tracy calls it, is data hoarding. So the service catalog is our first step in that direction to start acquiring and associating data about an endpoint. About a microservice to everything that microservice touches. Now, when we look at that from like the incidents or a data perspective, what we're going to be doing is building additional relationships to, like you're saying, Turkar, over to like an incident like ServiceNow or PagerDuty type of thing to get more incident information related into the microservice. We have the CVEs that the microservices has in it, the licenses. Those are all other data points that we're starting to collect. So we can collect anything that we want. We can start collecting, APM information, summary APM information, number of transactions per second, for example. We can bring that in. So any of that data that we want to collect, we can build that into the service catalog, and that will allow us to start exploring the data in different ways from different viewpoints. The one thing that will be a little bit tricky on the machine learning and AI side is the patterns are going to be harder to find because we're going to be looking at more relationships and then instead of patterns that are existing in a large data set. So that's going to be the interesting part when we look at it from an ML and AI perspective, is how we can leverage those tools with a smaller data set, but also be able to, understand the relationship for 4 steps away from where we are. How can we, make our way across the relationships to roll it up into meaningful, actionable data that we can work with.
So things to think about here for the future. But that topic is coming up a lot on the Deploy Hub side as we reach out to customers. So it's something that I think that this has been a good discussion about it. But we are 10 minutes over. So if there's anything else anybody would like to bring up.
Sasha, I don't know if you saw that I updated your notes. Okay. So take a look at that and refine your process diagram, and we'll take another go at it.
Yeah, no worries. I just created one diagram for architecture, and I'm creating the second one with your process just so I could understand a bit of how it all sort of fits together.
Perfect.
Yeah, is that cool?
Yep, that works.
And I spent some time with Utkarsh too, going through Captain, which was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yes, and Utkarsh wrote a blog, and I will get that pushed out on Captain. It was a very interesting blog. Everybody should look at it, but I'll get that pushed out through social media this week.
I also moved all that stuff I was working on, guys, to the Ortelius Google Drive, just so everyone can have access to it. Because at that point, it was all obviously in my stuff, right? And yeah, just better if it's available.
And did you share it with the group?
Well, I just put it in I just created a folder within or the Ortelius OSS.
I think
it automatically said it shared it with all the people that were already had access.
Perfect.
Ujwal took a test and he went and he said, yeah, you can access it.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Talk
Cheers.
to you soon. Right. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.